General Zaxathor of the Craxian Empire smoothed his iridescent scales and adjusted his ceremonial gravity dampeners, a completely unnecessary gesture given that the Galactic Defense Council chamber was already set to universal standard gravity. But old habits die hard, especially when you're trying to look appropriately dismissive of a species that evolved on a world with crushing gravitational forces. "You can't possibly be serious," he drawled, his secondary breathing chambers inflating with barely contained amusement. "These humans want to join our defensive alliance, the same species that still uses combustion engines to escape their gravity well." Around the crystalline chamber, various representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations tittered politely behind their appendages. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of engineering, its transparent walls showing the swirling nebula beyond, a subtle reminder of the Council's power and reach. Dr. Mei Zhou, Earth's representative, sat perfectly still in her chair, her expression serene. The only indication of her reaction was a slight upturn at the corner of her mouth, the kind of smile that had preceded the downfall of countless opponents who had underestimated her in the past. "With all due respect, General Zaxathor," she began, her voice carrying the same weight as a neutron star wrapped in silk, "I believe you're operating under some outdated assumptions about Earth's capabilities." High Admiral Calax, another Craxian with scales so dark they seemed to absorb light, let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so condescending. "Outdated? Your species still hasn't figured out how to manipulate quantum fields for personal transportation. You're still using wheeled vehicles for void's sake?" "And yet," Dr. Zhou replied, casually examining her datapad, "we managed to detect your stealth ships during your last reconnaissance mission, the ones you thought were completely undetectable. We have footage of our children waving at them from their playgrounds." The chamber fell silent. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Zaxathor's scales flickered in irritation. "A lucky coincidence. Perhaps your primitive radar systems randomly picked up some anomaly. We used our primitive systems to calculate their exact trajectories and predict their observation patterns," Dr. Zhou interrupted. "I believe we sent your crew some local snacks as a welcoming gift. I heard the commander particularly enjoyed the Twinkies." More uncomfortable shifting. Someone in the back actually chuckled before quickly disguising it as a cough. "This is preposterous," Zaxathor's gravity dampeners whined as he stood up abruptly. "You expect us to believe that a species that can barely lift itself off its own world deserves a place among the galaxy's elite defenders? Your kind can hardly function in low gravity without getting sick." Dr. Zhou's smile widened ever so slightly. "Perhaps we could arrange a demonstration, a test of sorts." "Yes," High Admiral Calax jumped at the opportunity. "Let's see your species prove its worth through action rather than words, something that demonstrates real power." "What did you have in mind?" Dr. Zhou asked, though her tone suggested she had already anticipated this exact moment. Zaxathor's scales rippled with smug satisfaction. "Since you're so proud of your ability to function under your world's oppressive gravity, let's make it relevant. Your species claims to have mastered your environment. Prove it. Move a mountain." He expected shock, protest, or at least hesitation. Instead, Dr. Zhou's smile bloomed into something that would have sent wiser beings running for the nearest escape pod. "Move a mountain," she repeated, tapping something into her datapad. "Would you like us to put it back afterward, or would you prefer we use it to build something useful?" For the first time since the meeting began, Zaxathor felt a tiny flicker of doubt in his primary stomach. He squashed it immediately. "1 week," he declared. "You have 1 week to demonstrate this capability, or Earth's application to the Council will be rejected for the next standard century." 1 week? Dr. Zhou stood, gathering her materials. "General, you underestimate human efficiency. We'll be ready in 3 days. I suggest you prepare your observation team, and perhaps bring some of those gravity dampeners. You might find them necessary." As she walked out of the chamber, the assembled council members watched in silence. It wasn't until the doors had closed behind her that Zaxathor realized he'd been holding his breath in all 4 of his breathing chambers. "She's bluffing," Calax muttered, but his scales had taken on the pale hue of uncertainty. "Of course she is," Zaxathor replied, trying to convince himself. "After all, it's just a primitive gravity-bound species. What's the worst they could do?" Somewhere in the distance he could have sworn he heard laughter. Rex mountain mover Martinez stood at the base of Mount Kanchenjunga, watching alien ships descend through the crisp morning air like metallic snowflakes having an identity crisis. He took a sip from his coffee mug, which proudly displayed the text, "I move mountains," literally, a gag gift from his engineering team that had aged like fine wine into prophecy. "They're really pushing the whole advanced civilization aesthetic, aren't they?" he muttered to Dr. Zhou, who had just arrived via helicopter. The alien vessels were all sleek curves and impossible angles, making the human vehicles scattered around the base camp look like children's toys in comparison. Bet they don't even have cup holders. The Himalayan testing grounds had been transformed over the past 48 hours. Where there had once been pristine snow and ancient rock, there now stood a bizarre mixture of human and alien technology. Massive hydraulic systems and quantum stabilizers dotted the landscape like mechanical mushrooms after a radioactive rain. The aliens had set up their monitoring equipment devices that looked suspiciously like overly complicated tripods with delusions of grandeur. "Remember the briefing, Rex," Dr. Zhou said, watching General Zaxathor emerge from his ship in what appeared to be a full environmental suit. "They're expecting a show of brute force. Let's give them a lesson in human ingenuity instead." Rex nodded, his mind drifting back to the day 3 years ago when he'd first joined the Mountain Mover project. He'd been a civil engineer with a crazy idea about combining traditional engineering principles with cutting-edge technology. Most people had laughed. His own mother had suggested he take up gardening instead. "Start small," she'd said. "Maybe move some potted plants first." But the military had listened. More importantly, they'd funded. "Systems check," called out Dr. Lakshmi Patel, the team's head of cybernetics, her voice crackling through the comm system. "Rex, ready to suit up?" The experimental exoskeleton suit stood nearby like a metallic cocoon waiting for its butterfly. Unlike the sleek alien tech, it was deliberately industrial in appearance, all exposed hydraulics and reinforced joints. The aliens had actually laughed when they first saw it. One of them had called it, charmingly, prehistoric. "Time to disappoint some postcards," Rex grinned, walking toward the suit as technicians began the mounting procedure. The exoskeleton opened like a blooming flower, made of titanium and carbon nanotubes, each piece precision-engineered to channel and amplify human biomechanical capability. As the suit enclosed around him, Rex reflected on the thousands of hours of training that had led to this moment. The failed attempts, the broken bones, the countless simulations, the time he'd accidentally punched through a concrete wall and ended up in the facility's cafeteria during Taco Tuesday, no less. Good times. "Your primitive containment apparatus appears unstable," General Zaxathor observed, his scales flickering with what might have been concern or indigestion. "Perhaps we should establish a larger safety perimeter." Dr. Patel's voice came through the external speakers, dripping with honey-coated sarcasm. "Oh, don't worry, General. We made sure to child-proof it. Though I should warn you, human children are surprisingly resilient." The suit's neural interface came online, flooding Rex's consciousness with data. The quantum stabilizers hummed to life, their field generators creating a network of intersecting force lines that would allow for the impossible. To the aliens' visible confusion, the human team had insisted on painting them hot pink. For visibility purposes, they'd claimed, though the shit-eating grins suggested otherwise. "Beginning power-up sequence," Rex announced, feeling the familiar surge as the suit systems synchronized with his nervous system. The exoskeleton wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of human capability, a multiplication of human strength through the careful application of physics and a healthy disregard for the word impossible. High Admiral Kallax, who had been scanning the suit with some sort of alien device, suddenly froze. "These readings, they can't be correct. According to this, you're channeling enough energy to power a small city." "Oh, that's not the suit," Dr. Zhou replied cheerfully. "That's just the coffee maker in the break room. We take our caffeine seriously." The suit's diagnostic display showed all systems nominal, each subsystem glowing a reassuring green. The neural interface was stable, the quantum field generators were purring like content cats, and the structural integrity field was holding steady. Most importantly, the cup holder was functioning perfectly. Rex took a deep breath, feeling the suit move with him like a second skin. The months of integration training had paid off. There was no disconnect between thought and action, no delay between intention and movement. The suit wasn't just machinery, it was a testament to human determination, a bridge between impossible and watch this. Final checks complete, Dr. Patel announced. All systems are go. Rex, you have control. The alien observers had retreated to what they considered a safe distance, their instruments trained on the suit and the mountain face. Their gravity dampeners hummed anxiously, as if sensing the impending violation of what they considered possible. I still don't understand, General Zaxathor said, his voice carrying a hint of genuine curiosity beneath the condescension. Why build something so obvious? Where are the gravity nullifiers, the mass reduction fields, the quantum displacement arrays? Rex turned to face him, the suit moving with fluid grace that seemed to surprise the alien observers. Sometimes, General, the most elegant solution isn't about ignoring the rules. It's about understanding them so well that you can make them work for you instead of against you. But it's just mechanics and hydraulics, Calax protested. Primitive forces. Primitive, Dr. Zhou's smile could have cut diamonds. Perhaps, but then again, the universe itself operates on these same primitive forces. We just learned to speak their language. Rex turned back to the mountain, running one final systems check. The suit responded perfectly, each movement a symphony of human and machine working in harmony. The quantum stabilizers created their pink web of force lines across the chosen section of the mountain face, mapping out the task ahead. Besides, he added, as the suit's power core spun up to full capacity, who said anything about just mechanics and hydraulics? The aliens would later swear they saw him wink, though human witnesses insisted that was impossible through the helmet's polarized visor. Either way, as Rex Martinez took his first step toward the mountain, even the most skeptical observer had to admit, there was something undeniably impressive about the way that primitive suit moved. The show was about to begin. The chosen section of Kanchenjunga loomed before them like nature's own monument to impossibility, a massive outcropping of ancient granite and metamorphic rock that had spent millions of years politely ignoring things like human ambition. The test area had been carefully selected, a semi-detached face weighing roughly 12 million tons, or, as Rex liked to think of it, a decent warm-up. Taking bets, announced Calax to the gathered alien observers. Current odds are 8,000 to 1 against the primitives. Any takers? His scales rippled with amusement as he added, I'll even accept Earth currency. I hear they still use physical tokens of exchange. How charmingly archaic. Dr. Zhou casually walked over, pulling something from her pocket. I'll take that bet, Admiral. Let's say $1 human. She held up a crumpled bill, her smile suggesting she was already planning how to spend her winnings. The quantum stabilizers hummed to life, their pink force lines creating a lattice across the rock face that looked like someone had decided to gift-wrap a mountain with geometric precision. Each intersection point glowed slightly brighter, marking the stress nodes where the force would need to be perfectly balanced. Beginning geological scan, Rex announced, his suit's sensors mapping every crack, fault line, and structural weakness. The heads-up display filled with data, density readings, stress tolerances, crystalline structures. Think of it as getting to know your dance partner before attempting a particularly ambitious lift. General Zaxathor's scales flickered in what might have been confusion. Dance partner? You intend to dance with the mountain? Metaphorically speaking, Dr. Patel chimed in through the comm, though I should mention Rex did once try to waltz with a boulder during a calibration test. The boulder led. The suit's hydraulic systems engaged with a sound like a mechanical whale doing its best impression of a pipe organ. Each movement was precisely calculated, the quantum stabilizers adjusting in real time to maintain perfect balance. The pink force lines pulsed in sync with the power core's rhythm. Phase 1 stabilization complete, Rex reported, beginning anchor point establishment. The suit's hands, if you could call them that, extended into the rock face molecular bonding fields, creating connection points stronger than the stone itself. It was like watching someone perform microsurgery on geography. Oh look, one of the alien observers commented, it's trying to hug the mountain. Should we tell it that's not how lifting works? Rex ignored them, focusing on the data streaming across his HUD. The quantum stabilizers were creating a network of intersecting fields that would allow for the impossible, not by defying physics, but by convincing it to take a coffee break. They're not even using proper gravity manipulation, Calax scoffed. Just watching these primitives fumble with basic forces is physically painful. Speaking of physical pain, Dr. Zhou mused, didn't your species evolve on a planet with 1/8 Earth's gravity? Perhaps you'd like to step back a bit further. The air displacement alone when we begin might be uncomfortable. The aliens shuffled back a few more meters, their gravity dampeners whining in protest. Power systems at 98%, Dr. Patel announced, quantum field stability holding at nominal levels. Ready when you are, Rex. Rex took a deep breath, feeling the suit move with him like a perfect dance partner. Beginning primary lift sequence in 3, 2... Wait, General Zaxathor called out. You can't possibly... 1. The mountain moved, not all at once. That would have been crude, inelegant. Instead, it began as a whisper of motion, a suggestion that perhaps the laws of physics were more like guidelines, really. The quantum stabilizers pulsed faster, their pink lines now bright enough to be seen clearly in the daylight. Impossible, Calax breathed, his scales going pale. The energy readings, they're not using any mass reduction fields or gravity nullifiers, they're actually lifting it. Raw force channeled through science, Dr. Patel's voice was entirely too cheerful. You know, that thing you thought we were too primitive to understand. The hydraulic systems worked in perfect harmony with the quantum fields, each system complementing the other. Where the hydraulics provided the raw power, the quantum stabilizers ensured that power was applied with surgical precision. It was like watching a ballet performed by industrial equipment that had decided to get a physics degree. Structural integrity at 87% and holding, Rex reported, his voice steady despite the strain. The suit's power core hummed louder, not quite straining but definitely showing off a bit. Beginning Phase 2 lift. The mountain face, all 12 million tons of it, began to rise more noticeably now. Ancient rock groaned in protest, then seemed to shrug and go along with it. Small avalanches of snow and debris created a counterpoint percussion to the hydraulic symphony. Notice, Dr. Zhou commented to the increasingly pale alien observers, how we're not just lifting straight up. The motion follows the natural stress lines of the rock face. We're not fighting geology, we're asking it to dance. But that's not how it's done, Zaxathor protested weakly. You're supposed to use quantum displacement fields to reduce the effective mass, then apply gravitic repulsors to... Oh, we're using quantum fields, Rex grunted, the suit moving through a particularly complex sequence of adjustments. Just not the way you'd expect. Instead of trying to cheat physics, we made friends with it. The alien observers' instruments were going haywire, their sensors struggling to comprehend what they were recording. One of them actually hit their scanner, apparently hoping that would make the impossible readings go away. Approaching maximum lift height, Dr. Patel announced, all systems still nominal, though I should mention the coffee maker is getting a bit low. The mountain face now hung suspended, held in place by a combination of human engineering, quantum physics, and sheer audacity. The pink force lines had created a three-dimensional lattice that made the whole thing look like the world's most ambitious art installation. Would anyone like to check their instruments? Dr. Zhou asked innocently. Verify the readings, perhaps? I believe several of you suggested earlier that our primitive sensors must have been malfunctioning when we detected your stealth ships. The aliens were too stunned to respond, their scales shifting through various colors of disbelief. One of them appeared to be trying to reconcile their entire understanding of physics with what they were witnessing. Another was quietly deleting their earlier social media posts about primitive Earth technology. Now then, Rex called out, the suit holding the massive weight with what appeared to be casual ease. Would you like us to put it back, or did you have something else in mind? We could probably arrange it into a nice sculpture, something tasteful, perhaps a commentary on the nature of assumptions. General Zaxathor, his ceremonial gravity dampeners now working overtime, managed to find his voice. You can put it back. Are you sure? We could spell out humans were here in mountain-sized letters, really brighten up the place. Please, Calax added weakly, just put it back. Well, if you insist. Rex began the careful process of returning the mountain face to its original position. Though I should mention this suit, it's one of our older models. You should see what the new prototype can do. The aliens collectively decided that maybe they didn't want to know about the prototype. Sometimes, ignorance really was bliss. As the mountain settled back into place with a gesture that could only be described as geological smugness, Dr. Zhou walked over to Calax, hand extended. I believe you owe me 8,000 times $1. unless you'd prefer to pay in primitive currency. The sound Calax made might have been a whimper, but everyone politely pretended not to notice. As the dust settled around the perfectly repositioned mountain face, Rex powered down the quantum stabilizers. The pink force lines faded like a cosmic light show, calling it a night, leaving behind only the stunned expressions of the alien delegation and the distinct smell of thoroughly crushed superiority complexes. "I believe," Dr. Zhou said, examining her nails with calculated indifference, "this would be an excellent time for a technical debrief. You did want to understand how our primitive technology works, didn't you?" General Zaxathor's scales had settled into a peculiar shade of green that suggested his gravity dampeners were the only thing keeping his breakfast where it belonged. Yes, please. Explain." Dr. Patel stepped forward, tablet in hand, her expression one of pure academic enthusiasm. "It's actually quite simple. We just had to rewrite a few basic assumptions about force distribution through quantum fields. Here, let me show you with equations." The tablet displayed a series of mathematical formulas that made several alien scientists clutch their sensory organs in distress. One of them actually started hiccuping in binary. "You see," she continued cheerfully, "instead of trying to negate gravity or reduce mass, we created a quantum lattice that essentially convinced localized space-time that the mountain was having an identity crisis. The pink force lines weren't just for show, though I must say the color choice was inspired. They created a framework of quantum uncertainties that allowed us to, how should I put this in terms you'd understand? Yes, we made physics negotiate with itself. But the energy requirements alone," Calax stammered. "Oh, that," Rex chimed in, now out of his suit and casually sipping coffee. "We just borrowed a bit of power from the mountain itself. Potential energy is quite generous if you ask nicely. The quantum stabilizers acted like very polite loan sharks." The geological impact of their demonstration was surprisingly minimal, by design, of course. The mountain face had been returned to its original position with millimeter precision, each layer of rock nestled back into place like the world's heaviest jigsaw puzzle. A few small pebbles had shifted, but they had probably been thinking about moving anyway. "If you'll examine the structural integrity readings," Dr. Zhou offered, pulling up another set of data that made the alien scientists whimper, "you'll notice we actually improved the stability of several key formations. Consider it a thank you gift to the mountain for its cooperation." General Zaxathor was still struggling with the implications. "But you didn't use any standard gravity manipulation techniques." "Why would we?" Dr. Zhou's smile was positively radiant with politeness. "When you grow up on a high-gravity death world, as you so charmingly called it, you learn to think differently about forces. We don't fight gravity, General, we've learned to dance with it." The alien delegation huddled together, frantically comparing readings and occasionally glancing at the mountain as if expecting it to stick out a geological tongue at them. Their instruments confirmed what their eyes had witnessed. Humans had not only moved a mountain, but had done so while completely rewriting several assumptions about what was supposedly impossible. "I believe," Dr. Zhou continued, her voice dripping with helpful enthusiasm, "this would be an excellent opportunity to discuss Earth's application to the Galactic Defense Council. Unless, of course, you'd like to see a demonstration with a slightly larger mountain. We did bring the prototype suit just in case." "No," the alien chorus was immediate and slightly panicked. "That won't be necessary," General Zaxathor added quickly. "Your current demonstration has been most illuminating." "Are you sure? There's this lovely peak just over there that's been giving us meaningful looks." "Please," Calax interrupted, his scales now cycling through colors faster than a malfunctioning disco ball. "We are sufficiently convinced of Earth's capabilities." Rex, still nursing his coffee, grinned. "Shame, really. The prototype has cup holders and a sandwich dispenser." The mountain stood silently in the background, its newly adjusted face catching the sunlight in a way that somehow managed to look smug. A few small avalanches in the distance sounded suspiciously like applause. "Well then," Dr. Zhou said, producing a tablet with the council application forms already pulled up, "shall we discuss the terms of Earth's membership? I believe you'll find our other technological demonstrations equally entertaining." The word entertaining seemed to cause physical pain to several alien observers. General Zaxathor, showing remarkable recovery for someone whose entire worldview had just been rearranged by primitives, managed a weak nod. Just one small question, he managed, about those stealth ships you detected. Oh, don't worry about those, Dr. Zhou replied with a wink. We've got some lovely footage of them trying to hide behind your moon. The children made a delightful compilation video set to classical music. Would you like to see it? The mountain, wise in the ways of geology and now somewhat experienced in the ways of human triumph, chose that moment to release another small avalanche. The timing was impeccable, almost as if millions of years of erosion had been waiting for just the right moment to drop the mic. 1 week after the mountain-moving demonstration, the Galactic Defense Council chamber buzzed with an energy usually reserved for supernova observations or particularly dramatic space opera premieres. The Craxian delegation had swapped their usual ornate gravity dampeners for significantly more robust models, just in case. General Zaxathor stood before the assembled council, his scales now permanently settled into a humbler shade of blue. In light of recent revelations, he began, trying not to wince at the memory, I move to fast-track Earth's application for membership. Seconded, Calax added quickly, still checking his surroundings for any mountains that might have followed them from Earth, with additional commendation for their unique approach to problem-solving. Dr. Zhou sat in her designated chair, radiating an aura of helpfulness that made several council members nervous. The datapad in front of her displayed a continuous feed of Earth's ongoing projects, each one more primitive and terrifying than the last. We accept your gracious nomination, she said, her voice carrying all the innocent enthusiasm of a black hole discussing gravitational attraction. And we look forward to sharing our other technological innovations with our new allies. For instance, we've recently been experimenting with something we call duct tape. The collective shudder that ran through the alien delegates could have registered on seismic sensors. There is, however, one small matter to address, Dr. Zhou continued. About those trade restrictions on primitive worlds, I believe we should discuss updating the classification criteria, unless, of course, you'd prefer another demonstration. Motion to revise primitive world classifications. The speed of Zaxathor's response broke several council records and possibly a few laws of physics. All in favor? The vote was unanimous, though several delegates appeared to be voting with their survival instincts rather than their actual opinions. Excellent, Dr. Zhou beamed. Oh, and General Zaxathor, Rex wanted me to tell you that he's been working on miniaturizing the mountain-moving technology. He's thinking of marketing it as a personal transportation device. Would you like to be a beta tester? The sound Zaxathor made was immediately classified as a state secret. We look forward to learning from Earth's innovative perspectives, he managed to say, his gravity dampener working overtime. Your species has shown remarkable creativity in approaching universal constants. Oh, that's so kind of you to say. Dr. Zhou's smile could have powered a small star system. We're just a bunch of primitive humans doing our best. By the way, we've prepared a little welcome gift for the council, a human invention called a joy buzzer. Would anyone like to try it? No one did. As the council session concluded, Zaxathor approached Dr. Zhou privately. I must admit, he said, showing unexpected grace in defeat, we may have been hasty in our initial assessment of human capabilities. Oh, think nothing of it, she replied. We're quite used to being underestimated. It makes the reveal so much more entertaining. Speaking of which, Rex is giving demonstration tours of our new orbital defense platform next week. He's calling it the mountain that moves itself. Would you like an invitation? Zaxathor's gravity dampener chose that moment to malfunction, leaving him briefly floating in a manner most undignified for a Craxian general. Dr. Zhou politely pretended not to notice. As Earth's first official delegation to the Galactic Defense Council departed the chamber, someone could be heard humming an ancient human tune about moving mountains. The council archivists would later note that this marked the first time in galactic history that a species had been admitted, while simultaneously causing every other member to update their defensive capabilities. Back on Earth, a certain mountain stood quietly under the stars, its recently rearranged face catching the moonlight just so. And if that face seemed to be smiling, well, sometimes even geology appreciates a good joke. After all, in a universe full of advanced aliens and impossible technology, who would have thought that humanity's greatest weapon would turn out to be their ability to make the impossible look easy while maintaining excellent comic timing?